2. As of January 5th, 2023, this was what Asuna and I had in terms of skills and equipment. Kirito, level 22 swordsman, skill slots 5. Skills in use, one-handed swords, martial arts, search, hiding, meditation. Equipment, Sword of Eventide, +3, Coat of Midnight, +6, Fortified Breastplate, +4, Skin-Tight Skirt, +2, Trousers of Shadow Thread, +5, Spiked Short Boots, +3, Ring of Brawn, Sigil of Lysula. Asuna, level 21 Fencer. Skill slots, 5. Asterix, 6. Skills in use, Rapiers, Light Metal Armor, Tailoring, Sprinting, Two-Handed Lances, Asterix, Meditation. Equipment, Chivalric Rapier, +7. Woven Hooded Cape, +2. Thinly Made Breastplate, +6. Fencer's Tunic, +4. Pleated Leather Skirt, +4. Prancing Boots, +3. Earrings of Ripples. Ring of Luminance. Sigil of Lysula. Asterix. Skill in the parenthesis is from the Crystal Bottle of Kelo. The recommended challenge level, accounting for the safety margin, was typically the floor number +7, so neither Asuna nor I had any reason to hold back on tackling the 7th floor statistically speaking. Half our gear was the rare quest rewards or boss drops, but that was far from all of it. In my case, the breastplate, shirt, and boots were ordinary store-bought items, and so were Asuna's cape, tunic, and skirt. They were powered up, but their absolute numbers were still far short of rare loot. So the first thing to do when we reached a new floor was to check out the NPC shops and see if we could buy anything that was an improvement on those items, preferably at a bargain price. It was a crucial part of survival in a deadly game, but it was also part of the fun of role-playing an RPG. After observing the shelves of the first armor shop we went into, Asuna muttered, "This selection isn't exactly inspiring, and the biggest shop in the main town." Just quietly enough for the shopkeeper couldn't hear. I nodded. "Yeah, unlike the eatery, this place hasn't been upgraded, it seems." I take that to mean it wasn't impressive in the beta either. My memory is hazy, but that is the impression I recall. "You had such a vivid and detailed memories of Stachin. Why is your knowledge of Lectio so vague?" she asked, pointing out my failing again. I pursed my lips. In order to explain why, I'd have to touch on a tragedy that befell me, that befell nearly every beta tester on this floor. I would have preferred to keep that memory locked deep in my mind, never to be spoken of again. But Asuna was too sharp. I wouldn't be able to hide it from her. I cleared my throat and said, "In order to explain why, we need to get to the town's exit." "That's fine. There's nothing much to buy here anyway." "Let's go then." I led a skeptical Asuna back to the teleporter square. There were still a few players to be seen, either because of the heat or because there wasn't much to see and do here. I wanted to take off my coat and breastplate, but I couldn't stop myself. The heat was only virtual. I concentrated on crossing the square, taking the east-west main street through the town on the west to do so. It wasn't very big town, so I just had a few minutes of walking brought into the view the wall that separated the safe zone of town from the dangers of the wilderness. "Huh?" Asuna murmured to my right. "Why are there 2 gates?" she said. At the end of the main street were 2 large gates with nearly identical design. The only difference between them was the marble sculpture atop each one. The sculpture on the right was a miserable-looking man, his back hunched over a cane, as though walking against the elements in a storm. The sculpture of the left was a decadently dressed man, in his back arched, holding an enormous wine glass. Each gate was open, offering a clear view of terrain on the other side. Beyond each gate was a path surrounded by green grasslands. There was nothing in between the paths on the far side of the wall, but there was nothing stopping you from going out one gate and taking the other path instead. So the meaning of the two gates was, to put it dramatically, I suppose they reflect the fates that awaits players beyond the gates. Fates? Asuna repeated, clearly thinking this was an overly dramatic. She glanced at the gates again. Then the path out of the right gate offers hardship, and the path out of the left gate is the easy road. This would suggest. That's mostly right, I replied, as we reached the open space just before the gates. There were no players here, either. Most likely, the two big guilds, the Dragon Knights Brigade, DKB, and the Aincrad Liberation Squad, ALS, had already chosen a gate and headed onward. Once we were there, the perspective effect on our visibility changed, making it impossible to see clearly out into the wilderness. In the distance, through the right gate, under the statue of the man with the cane, was a thick forest and a craggy, bald mountain. On the left gate side, under the man with the wine, the path seemed to sit on a flat plains as far as the eye could see. So, Lectio, on the eastern edge of the 7th floor, right? Meaning the labyrinth towers on the western edge? Asuna asked. Yes, I confirmed. And where's the starting point for the Elf War quest here? Should be in the center of the floor. It's roughly equidistant from whichever path you take. So we could probably take the easy path then, right? I suppose so, but only if you have an ironclad will, Asuna. All right, what is going on with you and these cryptic statements? What do the two paths have to do with your memory of this floor? She snapped. I could tell that her irritation gauge was rising, so I resigned myself to the difficult conversation ahead. Well, the right path has a lot of monsters and treacherous terrain, which is tough, but that's the normal game type route. The path on the left has a few monsters and flat land, but there's a huge town along the way. It's about 2 or 3 times bigger than Lectio. A huge town? Is it a dungeon? No, it's a human town. Safe zone, inns, shops, the whole deal. Good for food, too. So what's the problem? The problem is there's a huge casino in that town. Huh? Asuna's mouth hung open. She looked up at the sculpture of the man with the wine glass, then back down at me again. A casino like... A casino? Like in Las Vegas or Macau? Like in Las Vegas or Macau. Not that I've been to either, I said, gazing through the left gate. Like it or not, the bitter memories of the past were flooding back into my mind. Out of the 8,000 players in the beta test, I'd estimate that over 80% of them took the left path, and the majority of them got hooked on the casino, and the majority of them got taken for all they had. Rumors said that half of the beta testers dropped after playing on the 7th floor. Asuna was silent for a good 5 seconds, then walked around to face me directly, blocking my view. And what happened to you? I lost everything, I said, grimacing bitterly. All the coal I'd saved up from adventuring, all my rare items, everything. I only had my sword left, but I didn't give up. I got back on my feet again, and from there, headed out from the next floor. I might have lost the casino, but I didn't lose at the game. No, I didn't lose at the game. Right. What? We're going right, Asuna declared, cutting off my heroic saga, and she began to walk toward the gate under the man with the cane. I didn't argue with her choice. It wasn't like I wanted to make the same mistake twice, particularly because in the beta test, dying just meant coming back to life on the first floor, but there would be no starting over in your underwear this time. If I lost my money and equipment, I'd have to wait around in the town of beginnings for someone else to beat the game for us. But something inside me, perhaps my gamer soul, refused to let me stay a loser. I faced Asuna back and said something she didn't expect to hear. The beach. Huh? She turned around. I told her gravely. Didn't I mention this before? On the south side of the 7th floor, there's a beach with white sand and palm trees. That's part of the casino town in question, Volupta. Of course, it's not a real sea, just a bit of a lake that reaches to the edge of the floor, but the water itself is salty. A beach? She repeated the word, very conflicted. She glanced up at the bottom of the floor above, which was radiating sunlight and heat, then looked at me again. But with this heat, the beach should be packed with people, right? Actually, in order to earn a pass with the beach access, you have to win a ton of chips from the casino. And I doubt the DKB or ALS are going to get sidetracked with gambling, I said, thinking of the stern expression of Lind, the leader of the DKB, and Kabao, leader of the ALS. Asuna took a step closer to me, wearing a very similar expression. But that means we can't visit the beach without betting at the casino either. Well, yeah, but when I was telling you about that, do you remember what you said, Asuna? That if the 7th floor is eternally summer, you were going to do something at the beach. Asuna just blinked, taken aback. Then her eyes darted away, a very awkward, unnatural way, and she grunted, uh, She jabbed me in the side. So apparently she wasn't speaking in some non-human tongue after all. How much does that pass cost if you converted it to coal? It's the same price as in the beta. One casino chip is worth 100 coal, so it'd be 30,000 coal? 30K! She shouted. I couldn't blame her. My current net worth was about 90,000 coal. And I guessed Asuna was around the same. It would be insane to spend nearly a third of that for a chance to play on the beach. And yet... No, not so fast. The beach pass isn't bought with 300 chips. You get it from the casino once you've won 300 chips worth of games. So it's kind of like a VIP benefit. Meaning that once we got the pass, we could cash in all of our chips back to coal. Unfortunately, you can't convert chips into coal, but you can trade them for items with a high resale value. So you can sell them and make back the money, I said, silently adding in my mind, assuming you can actually win 300 chips. Asuna folded her arms and considered this information. After all of this, she decided she still wanted to go right. I was prepared to go along without a fuss. 10 seconds later, the fencer unfolded her arms, looked up at the sculpture with the man in the cane, then examined the man with the wine glass. Even if I won 30,000 chips, I still wouldn't lord it over anyone like he's doing. Well, let's go, my partner said, briskly walking towards the left gate. I followed her without a word. Of the two paths that extended from the gates of choice in Lectio, the NPC residents called the right northern path the Headwind Road. The left southern path was the Tailwind Road. Of course, that wasn't a literal reference to the direction of the wind, but a figurative one. The left path that we chose was pristinely paved with bricks, with flowery fields on either side. The road was ever so slightly tilted downward the entire way, and saw virtually no monsters. If only it were a bit cooler. This might be the most pleasant trip I've had yet in this place, Asuna commented. I stiffly yawned and agreed. The meadows on the second floor were nice, but Only if you ignore the occasional runaway bull. Ah, yes, the cow floor. I'd enjoy a chance to eat that enormous shortcake again. The tremble shortcake? Maybe I could have teleported back to Erebus, eaten the shortcake and gotten luck bonus, and then tried the casino. I commented ruefully. That buff only lasts 15 minutes, she pointed out. You'd never make it in time. You never know. If I sprinted for all I was worth, I might have enough time to play one game with it active. You really just wanted to gamble, didn't you? Asuna said, right as the deep buzzing of wings sounded nearby. We drew our swords and took a stance with our backs to each other. Monsters hardly ever appeared on the Tailwind Road, but that didn't mean that the few that did were pushovers. Their stats were par for the 7th floor, and their attacks were complex, so you had to be on your guard. Asuna scanned the northern side of the road, while I looked on the south side. When the wings picked up again, I heard her cry, "Get down!" I ducked as far as I could, resisting the natural urge to turn and sneak a peek. Something passed just over my back and ferocious speed. I looked up and saw a green shape hovering in the air about 30 feet away. It was an insect about 20 inches long with a translucent wings. The silhouette was squat and round. There was a long, sharp horn extending nearly the entire length of its body from its head. The pale red cursor displayed the name Viridian Lancer Beetle. What's Viridia? Asuna whispered. The name of the plains, I think, I murmured back. Uh-oh, it's coming again. The hovering insect lifted its sparkling emerald carapace. It buzzed the air, darted directly towards us. The horn of the Lancer Beetle, which first appearance on this floor, was powerful enough to punch a hole through plate armor at full speed. It was nearly impossible to parry with one-handed weapon. The only way to guard against it was with a sword skill, but even then, it wasn't easy to hit that sharp horn when it came blazing at you so quickly. If you failed, it would go through your chest, your head, and critically hit a counter could prove instantly fatal. Asuna and I crouched to avoid the Lancer Beetle's charge. I got to my feet immediately, turning around, then staring at the insect as it took a gentle turn over the field. Well, we can avoid it, but it seems endless to me, Asuna murmured. I shrugged. It's not endless. As you avoid its charges, their angle gets lower and lower, so eventually we won't be able to duck it anymore. Then what should we do? She asked. As the beta tester, it would be easy for me to simply give her the answer, but at this point, I wanted her to develop the observational skills and instincts to put together a strategy against unfamiliar monster type. I wasn't necessarily going to be there to help her forever. Can you tell what its weak point is? Underneath its body? Asuna replied at once. Should have known, I thought, impressed. Technically, it's the ganglion right in the middle of the place where all 6 of its legs meet. The brain's weak point, too, but they're usually heavily armored, and a giant horn makes it hard to aim for that. But how do we attack its under... Asuna started to say, but the Lancer Beetle lifted its wings sheaths as high as they could go, the sign that it was about to charge again. When a Lancer Beetle charged, only its head, thorax, and wing sheaths were visible. Each part was covered in tough armor that was highly likely to deflect any normal attack. If you attempted a normal sword skill and failed, it could deliver a fatal counterattack. By the way of a hint, I started in motion for a single hit skill vertical. Next to me, the tip of Asuna's chivalric rapier wavered with indecision. But then it went perfectly still. She assumed the stance for a charging skill, linear. Our swords took on a high-pitched whine and faint glow. Right on cue, the Lancer Beetle started its third charge. I resisted the urge to duck, waiting for the right moment. Asuna kept perfectly still, holding her active sword skill and weight. With just the barest of hints, she figured out the tactic that took me 2 deaths in the beta to figure out. The deep buzzing of its wings immediately growled louder, a sound that summoned a kind of primal fear. The wicked, sharp point of the horn was just 10 feet away when the two of us fell to the ground, but on our backs this time. The lancer beetle's less armored belly passed right over our faces. A normal swing would do almost no damage while we were lying on our backs, but a sword skill was different. As long as you maintained the right distance and angle between body and sword, the skill would activate, even if you were on the ground. Unfortunately, you couldn't get an extra boost of power from pushing off the ground, but that wasn't necessary to hit the belly of an insect-type monster. Ha! We exhaled in unison, unleashing vertical and linear blue, and silver light flashed. The two swords struck true at the base of the lancer's beetle's legs, cutting it deeply. They made a terrific wham sound, the sign of a successful critical hit. The monster's squat body shot upward, spraying crimson damage effects, and went into a tailspin. It took 3 or 4 of those attacks to defeat one in the beta, but my level and sword were considerably more powerful and doubled by the presence of my partner. Based on the physical sensation of the hilt, I guessed that one more hit would do the job. I pushed off the ground with my free hand and got to my feet. That was it. Now let's go again. But the spinning lancer beetle fell to the ground, bounced, and went still in the middle of the air unnaturally. It briefly contracted, then burst into blue particles. Countless shards flew out and then melted into air, gone forever. Huh? I gasped. Asuna almost sounded disappointed. Oh, it just takes 1 hit? Well, technically that was 2 hits, but even then, I wonder if they nerfed its hit points. Or maybe it's some new death mimicking skill, I thought. But there was a window that displayed the coal, experience, and items we'd earn. Asuna sheathed her rapier and began examining her rewards. Oh, this is interesting. They're giving us a ton of money and experience. But the items are all crafting mats? Hey, don't look down on insect parts. They can make armor that's way better than anything you find in stores. As long as you don't mind the look, I admitted, scrolling through our own items to the bottom of the window. Then, forgetting we were out in the dangers of the wilderness, I howled, "Oh! What?" Asuna shrieked. Startled, I hit the item materialize button, then grabbed the object that appeared in the window and turned around to face her. Ta-da! I thrust the 8-prism crystal under her nose. It was a color to deep rose pink, similar garnet. Sadly, my temporary partner did not understand the value of the item. She just looked at it, then me, then back at the crystal again. And what is that? It's called a healing crystal. Oh, so it's that thing you were talking about, she said, her face lighting up at last. She snatched it out of my fingers and held it up to the sunlight. Ah, so this is what they look like. And this really heals all your HP at once? Yup, sure does. How do you use it? Well, obviously you chew on the end, I said, then realized it probably wasn't a good idea to joke about how to use a crucial item that would be our lifeline in conquering this game of death. I cleared my throat and took the crystal back from Asuna. Okay, I'll be serious. Using them is very simple. It's the same way for all crystal items. First, you tap the surface of the crystal, then select Use from the menu that appears. Second, you hold it in one hand, then touch the other end to yourself or the person you want to use it on, and then you say, "Heal!" Yikes! I hurled the healing crystal. Asuna caught it, shouting, "Hey! Why did you just throw it at me?" You're supposed to hold it and just say, "Heal." But I very nearly used it on you when you already have full HP, I explained, feeling a cold sweat break out from my forehead. Asuna sighed deeply. Didn't you use these things all the time in the beta? You should know better. Not all the time. Even on the 10th floor, they were rare and a valuable item. And let me tell you, I wasn't the only beta tester who was saving them and ended up dying because we didn't want to waste them. Well, you'd better not do that now. If you or your partner is in danger, don't hold back. Just heal. Yikes! She shouted, without warning, and tossed the healing crystal as though it were red hot. I caught it. We stared at each other without a word. Eventually, Asuna murmured, You should probably put that away for now. Good idea, I agreed, opening the belt pouch on my left side. But I stopped there. No, you should have it, Asuna. What? It was your loot. It's yours, Kirito. In our partnership, I'm the vanguard, and you're the rear guard, right? It's just good tactics to have the crystals in the possession of the back row, because they have a better vantage point of the battle, I said, intently. I held out the crystal, but Asuna only pursed her lips. I wasn't just making that up. Players on the front line had to focus so hard on enemy up close that they could lose track of their hit points, and usually were just using both hands to utilize a crystal in the midst of battle. You had to let go of your weapon or shield. On that point, I already had my left hand free, so I could hold it in my hand to use it. But to my good fortune, Asuna didn't point out the hole in my logic. She accepted the crystal. I don't appreciate being labeled in the back row, but I take your point. In that case, I'll hold on to this. You're not just holding on to it. Like you yourself said, you need to use it without hesitation when you are in danger. She nodded, dropping the crystal into her belt pouch. A sudden thought flickered in my mind. Maybe I should have kept it. That way I could avoid using it on myself as long as necessary, holding out for Asuna's benefit as much as possible. Wouldn't Asuna agree? In that case, both of us should keep the crystal. Healing and purification crystals were very rare in the beta, but we just got one from the very first monster we fought on the 7th floor. Perhaps they revised the drop rates and made them easier to find. Asuna looked around the field, seemingly having the same train of thought. Hey, are those stag beetles the only ones that drop healing crystals? Not at all. Some monsters drop them more often, but from the 6th floor on, every monster has a tiny chance of dropping one. Tiny chance? Like, how tiny? Well, this is only according to what was researched during the beta, but they found that the chance was 0.01%. On the 6th floor, it was 0.1%. On the 7th floor, I think 0.01%. Meaning you might get for every 10,000 monsters you beat? Asuna exclaimed, arching her eyebrows. I shook my head. That was for the 6th floor. We beat a ton of monsters on the 6th floor, and we never got a single crystal, right? But the 7th floor, it's 0.1%. So that's still 1,000. Yeah, I know, but they might have improved the odds since the beta, I said hopefully. Only then did the puff of rage over Asuna's head calm down. Well, we did get the drop from the first monster, so there's no one else around. Want to try hunting more stag beetles? Sure. I glanced at the clock readout in the corner of my view. It was 1:15 in the afternoon. Even at a casual pace, it wouldn't take us 2 hours to get to the gambling city of Volupta. We could kill an hour or so hunting before we continued on, and it wouldn't be dark yet. So let's do a little monster hunting farming and practice beating lancer beetles. Roger that, said Asuna with a grin. She stepped off the path into the field to the north. Over an hour and a half, Asuna and I beat about 15 Viridian lancer beetles, about 10 Viridian poison wasps, a powered-up version of the wasp from the 2nd floor, and about 5 greasy worm lizards, creatures that oozed up out of the earth like a cross between a snake and an earthworm and a lizard. One monster every 3 minutes was a significant pace on the Tailwind Road, where monsters were few and far between. Asuna quickly mastered the tactic of using sword skills as you fell, the trick to beating a lancer beetle. Aside from the one time she fell to the ground using the new tactic, only to freak out when she saw the greasy worm lizard wriggling up from the dirt right beside her. Our hunting went very smoothly. We got plenty of money, experience points, and materials, but unfortunately not a single extra crystal. 30 monsters, of course, was not nearly large enough of a sample size to gauge whether they'd adjusted the rates, but at the very least, it didn't seem like they'd be dropping all over the place. What should we do? Keep trying a bit longer? Asked Asuna, holding her rapier. I considered the question, then replied, No, we should wrap it up now. If we keep trying, we're not going to be able to reach Volupta before it gets dark. Is that a particularly bad thing? She asked. For a moment, I wasn't sure what to say. I couldn't come right out and tell her it was because Volupta was an enchanting sight in the sunset. Instead, I looked up and offered weakly, well, it's our first time down this road, so we might get lost in the dark, you know? It wasn't even 3 o'clock yet, but the light around us was already starting to turn a rich golden, and you could tell the temperature had dropped a fair bit. How could we get lost? It's a single path. But fine. Asuna agreed, sheathing her sword. I placed my own in the container on my back and walked us toward the brick road. It's funny. We've been hunting for an hour and a half, and not a single other player has come this way. I wonder why, I asked. Asuna looked down the road both ways, seemingly realizing it for the first time herself. I suppose you're right. Do you think the DKB and the ALS and Agiles group all chose the Headwind Road? Huh. The only benefit that route is you eliminated the risk of going bankrupt. That just makes it sound like we're at risk of going bankrupt. I hunched my shoulders, ruining the mistake of saying anything at all, and pointed to the southwest. Well, let's just get going. Once we get to Volupta, you'll see there's plenty to do aside from the casino. Despite her skeptical expression, Asuna said nothing more on the matter, and we hurried down the brick road as the hints of nightfall crept closer.